differences across individuals. In some cases, you don't. Right? Measure of aptitude. It's possible we would like to see no differences across different groups in aptitude. But the example given in your chapter is, should we see differences if we are trying to evaluate second language facility? And the answer is, if your test does not let you know who is bilingual and who is not, you haven't captured the construct, right? Mm-hmm. So you can't just assume what those differential population studies are trying to tell you. You have to know what you're looking at. So that's another type of study that you'll see in construct-related validity. Third one, sorry about this, what we call related performance studies. And this is the one that people often confuse with predictive or criterion-related validity. And here, that idea is, if I've got two completely different measures of the same construct, I give them to the same population, and there's no relationship between what happens, then that's evidence that it's not necessarily bad, but that's evidence that I either do or don't have a well-defined construct with an appropriate measure. So if the two measures appear to be measuring the same construct, that's convergent validity. If they appear to be measuring something completely different, that's a divergent validity evidence. And let me give you an example. If I give two assessments of creativity, I think they're the same, I think they are tapping the same thing about creativity, and individuals score similarly, that's convergent evidence. Famous example in divergent evidence is the tests and assessments you might give to discriminate between intelligence and creativity. Are they the same construct? Are they a different construct? If the scores diverge on those things, they're not the same construct, and that establishes construct validity for whatever you have to be studying.
Is that the same as that those personality things where you have the alpha, I forget all of the domains, those 4 domains, you had the one who was introverted, extroverted, and you had basically leader follower. I can't remember what the words were for it.
Oh, well, there are a number of quote, theories about various personality types, and you might be tapping into those, like the Myers-Briggs stuff, or introversion, extroversion, which are all personality characteristics. And there are theories of leadership which seek to define. There's another big construct, right? Leadership. How do you tap that? So I'm not sure which one you're referring to.
I don't remember either, but in my mind, I'm thinking that has to do with a convergent performance type story. You're basically trying to, for the same questions, you want people to either go one of 2 ways in that kind of a situation. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It's probably another construct, but you're right. We do have buried in our thinking about creativity whether or not divergent thinking fully taps creativity. Maybe that's what you're thinking of. It's possible. But actually what I think you're describing is one of 2 things, either a quote leadership style or a personality. And there's several personality measures that try to capture our temperament. Are we introverted? Are we extroverted? Do we respond better to concrete information, or do we prefer to think abstractly? That might be where you go. Ray.
If it converges, it strengthens both assessments. For example, creativity. If it converges, it strengthens construct. This one was measuring, this one was measuring. However, if it is divergent, I cannot make a conclusion on either assessment sure which one actually measured construct or didn't, or maybe both did it. Correct me if I'm wrong, that is the general thing I'm getting in the last 3 weeks, is that if it doesn't match, if there's a discrepancy, if it's skewed, if there's any irregularities in the assessment piece, you're really left wondering, I really don't know much. Either it strengthens or I'm back to square one. Is pretty much what it is. Right?
Yeah, that's kind of an Eeyore approach to it. Kind of, you're right.
Eeyore approach. I like that.
Yeah, Ray, I'll go along with that. I'll just put a smile on my face when you say it. Let me just push the envelope a little bit further, because y'all are getting this. I can tell, even though you look at me. Sometimes what you get when you get that divergent, you actually do that on purpose. Researchers will do that on purpose. They will give a test that purports to measure one construct and an assessment that purports to measure another one, and then they will try to see how much they overlap. And if they don't overlap much, they'll go, yippee! I have evidence for both my constructs. Yeah. So they will do that. On the other hand, exactly what you're saying is that they thought they had to measure the same construct, and they don't overlap at all, then you're stuck going, oh, I didn't do that all, which is exactly a kind of grim.
Well, I was thinking about, even when we talk about identifying children.
Yeah.
And we can call evidence, we try to get multiple measures. It's really easy to identify a kid who really scores strong in all these different categories, and you're like, she's in. I mean, and then you get ones where you think you're measuring the same thing, you get strong data here, he doesn't test high on the creativity, but his portfolio is amazing, and you're sitting there going, and when you have your committee sitting around, same with special ed, you have your committee sitting around, you're trying to make this decision, and everybody's there that's thinking, is this kid really creative? Is this kid actually, when the assessments don't match? I mean, and you're sitting there going, I can't tell you, and you have to make,
Well, you're getting yourself into a right pickle, but it's an inevitable pickle, because in addition to, we could have taken the construct of giftedness and tried to operationalize it, or we could have taken the construct of autism and tried to operationalize it, or we could have taken the construct of mental retardation and tried to operationalize it. Those are all constructs, every single one of them.
Well, and with his, I immediately think there's a difference between being creative and being a hard worker.
Yes.
So that's immediately what I thought of when you addressed that, because you can not be creative, but you're just a hard worker, and so you score well on a lot of these things, but you're not truly creative per se.
And that's what we have to grapple with. Have we got the boundary around our construct well defined enough we can actually quote test it? Or if we can't, because by now you figured out construct validity is a real big deal, isn't it? How do you decide? How do you decide in terms of construct validity? I'm pointing my finger at Monica here. How do you decide what constitutes the achievement of first-year physics in college? Well, somebody stood around and did just what we're doing now to try to figure that one out so they could create an AP exam. The construct being physics performance at the freshman level.
Would that all be criteria? Really not separated.
Some people believe that both content and criterion-related validity are subsumed by construct.
I would agree with the construct idea of that, because if it weren't, it wouldn't be a constant debate and you wouldn't have constant test redesigns. You know, because if it wasn't a construct, in my mind, you wouldn't have the debate about what should be included on that test to show the achievement. Therefore, you wouldn't have the constant test redesigns. That's why we have the test redesigns constantly, is because they're constantly changing their idea of what constitutes the equivalence of a first-year college course for these different subject areas.
Well, and driven by our changing conceptualizations of the domain of physics.
And I'm saying that's any of those
Yeah.
type of tests in general,
Yeah.
you know.
It's fun to think about this because this puts your professional judgment in high gear, which, quite frankly, usually your professional judgment has to be on hold because you're in classroom management and other kinds of things, 8 to 5 every day, 8 to 4:30 or 8 to 2:30 every day in public school. Heaven knows when y'all in higher ed get to sleep. I don't think we do. I saw a hand somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say a majority of content is construct, just because of its changing, rearranging. You know, beyond math, I don't know of a content that isn't construct, especially with the way that I would almost venture to say English, but our language changes so drastically, and it's been changing even more over the last 50 years than ever before. So
It's a living thing.
yeah, so I can easily look at almost any level of content area or criteria and say that it is construct. So it kind of has to fall in there.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's interesting to think about. Perhaps the quote clearest, if it can be called clear, way to think about construct validity is to keep it over in the psychological domain rather than the achievement domain if you can. That helps you to discriminate more fully between content validity and construct validity. What they are not mutually exclusive. You're exactly right. Okay, so there's your problem. And can you see the problem that we have when we start to think about what constitutes a construct-related influence?
Well, and that's what kind of just got brought up. Even if we can get the construct validity defined, right, there's gray areas between all of these where all three types of validity can overlap in some aspect.
They can. And when you look at assessments, you kind of really want, I'm going to hand this out because this is related to our discussion. It'll kind of capture some of it. But I don't want you to feel like there are going to be questions on the exam about theories of creativity, okay? They're not. I'm using it because it's a common construct that everybody can relate to, no matter what age of individual you're working with, what domain you're working in, and what your perspective is. But I do want to talk with you a little bit about issues that affect validity. Can we do that? Can we move on to that? This is perfectly awful. Let me see.
Some window markers to use.
Maybe turn it into a typeset. Okay. It's a big C. Yeah. All right. I'm going to have to erase this. No. Okay, so C. Factors that affect. How are you doing? Because I gave you no break, but because I was over there copying stuff, I figured you got up and moved around. So, things that will affect validity. First, the reliability of the measure will inevitably affect validity. If you have an unreliable test, just throw validity out the window. You ain't got it. You must have a reliable measure for it to be valid. Now, you can have a terribly reliable measure, and it can be provide you with completely invalid inferences. Can you think of an example of how that might happen?
IQ test is really reliable, but it may not be valid for low risk gas.
Okay. Good example. Anybody else? Charlie? Okay, I'll pick one. So just never forget that. If it's not reliable. Now, the second thing that affects is we will have things called systematic bias. And it will affect the validity of your test or the inferences that you can make. Do not assume, I'm talking about measurement bias here. Systematic error, not bias in the sense that we think of social bias against women, against member of a cultural group. I'm talking about bias as in how errors work, as error works. What we want is what we call random error. If we have random error, it just floats in from anywhere, and it's what we call noise. And we can kind of partial that out. Remember when we talked about accuracy of error last time? Systematic bias is something that keeps occurring in the same way again and again, and so it'll pull our results and our inferences in predictable ways. And if we're not aware of it, it makes our inferences invalid. So, for example, one way you can get systematic bias which makes your inferences difficult, is in the method of measurement. I'll let you can see this. Now this is a really interesting example I'm going to give you because I think it's an example that's changing. If you want to know something about someone's quantitative reasoning, and you give them a story problem, and they're not fluent in the language in which the story problem is given, are you assessing their quantitative reasoning? Probably not, right? That's a method of measurement bias. Because if you're not, or let's say, it doesn't even have to be that it would be not your original language or your birth language. It could be that you have dyslexia or something, just anything that doesn't allow you to process prose appropriately. We're theoretically assessing quantitative reasoning or achievement, and yet in there is language. So you have to think to yourself, do I got to keep that in mind? Because everybody loves a story problem in math these days, don't they? It's to be application. So can you see how that might introduce systematic bias? Yes. I see two questions. Who wants to go first?
Systematic. So you're saying systematic, you're still saying these are biases that still happen within the individual, not the assessment. When I think it's systematic, I'm thinking outside the individual. I'm thinking we're talking about item placement and how a student would answer a question and the difficulty in which they order. When I think about systematics, I'm thinking, when you talk about systematic measurement, I'm thinking, is this as simple as we use the Scantron sheet, a child knowing how to use the Scantron sheet would be a one, or the fact that my machine that's going to grade it has its own, it's not going to, any Scantron machine, there's error in scanning it. It's random, as you described. It's random, but it's only going to be, it's not going to be 100% accurate, ever.
Yes, and if the error is random, it's unfortunate, but it's less damaging than if it is systematically, if there's systematic error, which then turns into bias. Okay? It's a great question, Ray. hold on to it a minute. I'll give you a couple other examples and see what you're thinking. You tell he's responsible for assessment in his district. So this is a really important question for you. Mr. Nestor, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was
Okay, we can come back to you.
yeah, let's do that.
Okay. All right. Actually, Ray, you mentioned one of the things that introduces systematic bias into measurement. I know you can't see this. I'll tell you what it is. Enabling behaviors. You are right. If a kid has never seen a Scantron, sheet before, there is a systematic bias there. Unfamiliarity introduces systematic bias. You can predict that a child has never seen a Scantron sheet before is probably going to score lower. That's systematic. Are they going to? Random would be if they might score higher or might score lower. Systematic is they don't have the enabling behavior. The enabling behavior is familiarity with how to fill out a Scantron sheet. You guys in working with these primary kids, you know that you're doing, you know what you're doing. You're trying to prevent systematic bias when you teach kids how to bubble in a Scantron sheet. I mean, kids are not born knowing that you got to color in the whole bubble or you don't the whole little circle, or you get it wrong. You know, when you're 5, you don't know that. So you have, right? Am I right? Primary people, you have to do that. Okay, so that's an enabling behavior. If you don't do it, the systematic bias is what? The systematic bias is they'll score lower. And that does not allow you to make a good inference about the validity of the assessment.
It's so high. Now this is theoretical. It's so high in grades K through 2. It is interesting that if maybe that alone, you know, we use different assessments in those grades because the gross motor skills don't match. You can't draw any conclusion. You know, it's, I'm trying to get at it, like, we don't use them for high stakes K2 in the state of Arkansas. And we don't identify them as GT in general until we're not second or third grade as well, for other reasons than that. But they will use those observatory scales on all the way. Because in that age, we're saying that those kinds of tests are more accurate than the other kinds of tests. Or more valid, would be the word.
You're right. I'm lost.
The K2 student doesn't necessarily have the natural ability to express what they know in a written form, whether it be bubbles or writing.
That's a good inference to make. And it's one reason why we often say that assessments are less accurate and the tails of a distribution of test takers. So very young children and very elderly people. Their equipment is developmentally different, and so they may, in fact, those assessments given to those populations may be less accurate if we're relying on pencil and paper assessments. Is that what you're getting at?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Good, because that was about where I was able to go. Yeah.
I was going to ask, based on the fact that assessments are used to find out certain information, how, and I think this is one of the biggest problems with tests is that there are so many biases because you're looking for something. How can you even avoid a bias when you're specifically looking for something?
You cannot generally avoid bias. The trick is to know the degree of bias you have to account for yourself when you're making an inference. And that's what takes test interpretation out of the mechanical realm of the test and the score on the test and into the very professional realm of your judgment.
And is that majority of what last class was for in regards to error? Okay.
To me, one of the great problems that we have in this assessment-driven culture, and I've never seen education so assessment-driven in my life. I've never seen anything to equal what we expect of assessments and what we expect of education currently. I've never seen anything like it. And at some point, my belief is some of it will topple because it's the accountability apparatus has now become so overwhelming that it has taken over. It's taken over. And part of the problem is that the general public and policymakers do not have this information and therefore are not in a position to always make appropriate inferences about what tests do to tell them. And it is sadly to the detriment of children and teachers and school administrators, whether they're wherever they are. Sorry about that. It's not a happy tale, but
Thank you
that's
so
what it
much
is.
for that sobering feeling.
Yeah, but I mean, it's what it is. Well, but that's why as professionals, we have to stand up and speak up, because that's just how it has to be. Yes, ma'am.
I just need to clarify something in my brain. Okay, so in a general classroom, like, second grade classroom of some sort, you have children from all developmental ranges, all different cultures, all different abilities. You give them a math test that's multiple choice, but 10 out of the 25 kids have a really hard time reading. So that test becomes invalid because of the systematic bias of
the test itself is probably not invalid, might even be well constructed, but the inferences that you make have to be tempered by what you know about the student certificate. It's a subtle difference, but a real one. Okay? Go on.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Item selection is a way that it will affect validity. And here we have, you can get items on a test that are irrelevant to what you're trying to test, and you can miss really important items that should have been on there. Okay? So you can have construct irrelevant variance, and then you can have stuff in there that, well, that's construct irrelevant variance. You've got stuff in there that shouldn't be in there. Okay? So your item selection, if there's a lack of congruence between what you thought you were testing and what you weren't testing, that's a systematic bias. That's a systematic bias. It's not random error, it's systematic. Random good, systematic bad. All error, we just live with it. Just like we live with errors. All right. Yes? I'd rather not live with their foolishness. Ray, you like this one. Administration errors can be systematic. Your Scantron machine is eating up somebody's Scantron every once in a while. That's an administration error if you give the wrong directions on the test. And all of that is systematic. You give the same wrong directions to a whole class of kids, you've just systematically introduced bias into your inference. I promise you I have a lovely little summary sheet that's going to put all of this together. So if you're going crazy back there, we got it. And the last thing, I know nobody can see this all the time. Has to do how you can introduce systematic bias into validity inferences, has to do with norms. Remember we talked about this before. If you have a great test, well constructed, super duper, and your norm sample on which you attempted to validate it didn't include any of the individuals to whom you are now giving the test, that introduces systematic bias. Remember the example I gave when suddenly they're trying to norm an achievement test and all of the children who are identified as needing special education services suddenly are not in school that day? That invalidates the subsequent use of that test with individuals who have been identified for special education services. Make sense? Norms. The inappropriate use of norms. Better is not just norms, but unrepresentative norms. Unrepresentative norms. Okay. All right. Stick a fork into that is validity. You have to think big, but it's not quantitatively challenging. Validity is not quantitatively challenging. It's just logically challenging, isn't it? Anybody got a question before I hand out the information?
Aren't there always some items that are thrown in there that are supposed to be sort of random? I mean, not random. There's always a specific
No, I don't. Keep talking to me.
well, okay, usually it's the
The distractor. The
That's what I'm
distractor.
trying to get to.
Oh, yes.
Is that what you're talking about here, or what?
In terms of item selection,
Yes, ma'am.
no.
Okay.
You're talking about, she asked a great question though. She's talking about the none of the above, all of the above, distractor on multiple choice questions.
Or
And
just the kind of off the wall that if you're paying attention, you know it's not that.
yeah, and those are bad distractors. We'd like them to be better than that.
Okay.
Good distractors sound equally plausible.
Right.
That's a good item. A bad item would have one where a kid goes, yeah. Nobody would answer that. For example, did you all look at your Arkansas Times this week where they had a quiz? I'll have to bring that up. That's bird watching. Okay, here is the review sheet. That'll give you some sense of what's going on here. And then the other thing I have, but I'll have you pick it up as you go out, is an assessment outline. And I'll tell you how to use it as a study tool. It's basically everything I've been talking to you about, but it's kind of partially filled in. Reason early. That's not fear, is it? So the way you're going to use my outline is that you're using a study. You take it and you try to fill it out without looking at your notes, and you find you can't fill it out, and that's where you go back in your notes and you need to study. Okay? So that's I got it here for everybody. I just we'll put it down so that you don't look at it right now. So let's take a gander at the review sheet. First thing there is really pretty, as we were to talk about it in terms of table specifications, is pretty low level. Definitional. Okay, you know the difference between the norm reference and criterion reference test? I would say yes, based on what I saw in pre-test, information, but, get them down for you. Understand the types of test decisions. And then, are there things that you have to do? Let's talk about this, because the form of the test is basically, I think it's about 42, 43, 44 multiple choice items, and then about 3 short answers. Okay? So when it says descriptive statistics, and it then has calculations of mean, median, and mode, you might actually have to do that, and you can have a little hand calculator in here, but you're also basically selecting from among multiple choice distractors to do that. Okay? All right? So, one of the kinds of things you'll see on the exam is an array of data that's not unlike when we played around with Harry, Sally, and Joe, and you had to figure out various types of standard scores. Except you won't see 3 kids, you might see 10. And you might see 10. And some data will be given to you and some will not. But you might see 10 kids with 2 test scores each, and you have to understand how to determine what the mode is, how to determine what the median is, and what the mean is. Make sense? You have to be able to answer a question about a correlation coefficient. So, what's a really important concept that we talked about in terms of correlation coefficients? Correlation coefficients have both size and valence, right? They can be negative or positive, and then they're the size of the number. So be sure you understand, can a negative correlation be more powerful than a positive correlation? Yes, it can. Get that in your head. So there are a couple of quote formula that you have to know. Because look here under quantification of test performance, that's types of scores, and those are raw scores, derived scores, and standard scores. You need to know how to convert from a raw score, so if you're given a raw score, you would know how to convert to what's the magic one, which is the standard score that will let you do anything you want to do. The z-score. The z-score. So know that little formula. It's pretty simple, isn't it? Sure. Okay.
It's in there somewhere.
I'll give you a minute to look. You want to look? Anybody want to tell me what it is, and then you put it on the board here?
Raw score minus average score divided by standard deviation.
Okay, here's the raw score.
Minus the average score divided by the standard deviation.
Good. What does that give me?
Z-score.
Everybody with him? Do you? Do you? So can you see if you got it? Can you see what will happen to you? You get a range of 2 scores each for 10 kids. You've got the raw scores. I give you the standard deviation. You could theoretically convert that, right? Oh, yes, you could. Oh, yes, you could. Yes, you could. Yes, you could. Yes, you could. Okay, here's another one I think you ought to know. You don't have to know any of them. You ought to know this one. Who can tell me how to get the standard error negative?
Standard deviation times the square root of 1 minus r.
Wow. Now that's pretty much, I think, when I think of the items that are on that test, that's pretty much all you gotta do. And one little test taking tip I will tell you is before you start in on your assessment, take a piece of paper and draw yourself the normal curve and just put your percentile ranks out of each of the plus 1, 2, 3, minus 1, 2, 3. Just give, that's okay. That's not cheap. That'll help you home. All right, let's keep looking here. What else do you see? Okay, we're pretty much done here, aren't we? You're not sure what to ask me on this review yet. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me go to the next step, all right? Let me give you this, and I'll be quiet for a minute, and then you may have in your mind what you might want to know next. And then I'm going to give you a break for lunch, and I'll see you on Monday. So the Smart Money has people organizing who they might want to send with them.
Assessing creativity you gave us?
That is not, to my knowledge, that is, I will think, hard. There is no question related to that handout on the exam. It's used as an example of how to think about constructs related. So there could be questions. This is a great question. There could be questions about these things, but not specific to creativity. Now, we will ask you to write an essay on it's a thinking guide, okay? So, let me ask a question. If you look at the syllabus, let's do that. It sort of gives you some constraints. And let's talk about how we're going to manage this. Because I can't leave it open forever, right? But I also know that people have different things going on in their lives. So let's talk about what we can do. So we're on February 16th. You've just turned in your classroom assessment, Making Sense. We're going to be able to take care of the required for date Ages 23rd this afternoon instead of on the 23rd. So flip over to March 2nd in your I want you to take the exam before you come to me on March 2nd. Because I won't get anybody paying attention to what we're talking about on the 2nd if you haven't got the exam right. And if I were to get so lucky as to have a chance to grade it, then your anxiety would be reduced and you could actually have problems that day. So, you've got to complete the exam by Friday night, March 1st at 10. So now talk to me. I can't have that exam open for 2 weeks. I can't do that. So let's talk about what we can do. If I open that exam on Thursday and give you Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, that doesn't work. If I open the exam on Wednesday and give you Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, will that do it?
How long at a time?
I don't think people, when I've had it taken face-to-face, I've had people finish it in 45 minutes to an hour, and then I've had people take 2 hours. So I set it up I set it up so people will not freak out over time at about 2 hours, 2 and a half. Now, I think it is set up so that you have to go in and come out. You can't go in and out. Once you open it, you exit it. You forfeit every unanswered question.
Can you leave it open a week or have a part of a weekend?
That's the knowledge. That's when I stuff is the weekend.
Hard to get to a computer and stuff.
So, yeah, but I can't really leave it open much more than a couple of days at a time. You understand what my problem is there?
So you would open it Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then
Of the previous weekend.
Well, let me ask this. We're kind of far away, and you do have a weekend to study, which would be the weekend of the 23rd and the 24th. So that next weekend would be the 2nd. I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. Or, yes, I can do that.
Because I don't normally touch grad work stuff until the weekend, because the week is school stuff.
Yes, it is. That is
Very much so.
That is my problem for you. However, I also want people who want to take Friday night and Saturday to study. I don't want to cut them out of the game either. So, do you want me to? Then that would change the end date. So it would be the 24th. It would be the 24th. Because I can't leave it open a week. Do you understand why I can't? I just really can't. All right? I've got to leave it open maybe 2 to 3 days at the max. So is that what you would like me to do? Would you like me to open it on Friday night, the 22nd? Leave it open all day, the 23rd, and all day, the 24th, and close it off. I can change that so you can stay up until midnight if you would like. Do you want me to do that? Is that the better option for you, other than a Thursday and Friday?
Because I'll to be completely honest, I'll probably to take it.
It's on you! It's on you! Don't do that! Don't do that! But there's an automatic, I'll have an automatic thing sent out to your email saying, test is open! Okay, now is there anybody who has a problem with this? Because that's slightly different than the posted date. It would. It would.
And you said you would open it on Friday.
I can open it on Friday, and I am happy to open that on Friday, early enough on Friday that it does you some good. Okay? Is that what you want? Okay, so I can get it open probably by 9 a.m. I'm not going to promise 8 a.m. Okay? But I can get it open by 9 a.m. on Friday. What's that day? The 21st? 22nd. And it would stay open the 23rd, and I get it closed down at midnight on the 24th. That's late Sunday night. Is that going to work for y'all? Yes. Okay. Are you sure? Okay. You go in I can set that, and I have generally set that at 2.5 to 3 hours, nobody takes that. But the annoying thing about the online testing is you can see the little clock. So be aware that you might get in and out of there in 45 minutes to an hour, but it's going to keep on.
You have automatic feedback.
No, it doesn't. It's not set up.
But you set that for a long time.
Well, it is a long time. Okay, remember what you've got here. You've got 44, I think it's 42 or 44 multiple choice items, and you've got, I think it's 3 short answer, not big essay, short answer. Okay?
What do you define as short answers? Is that like?
Oh, it's about a paragraph. Most of them are about a paragraph. And as you might think, what are the 3 big legs of the stool related to technical adequacy? That'd be a good one to know. Norms. Yes. Norms are standards. Okay?
It was fun.
Somebody asked me how long is long on the short answer, and I said, not a good paragraph. If I paragraph, I don't mean 3 lines. 3.5 page, probably is what's going to take. And then I just gave the glaring fire engine hint. What are the 3 main areas of technical adequacy?
We can do this from your
That is a very good question. All you have to do is be able to get on Blackboard and go ahead and exam questions.
somebody that's like a for my classes that says you have to have
I do not, I suppose that I will learn to my great grief that there's something that can go wrong and will go wrong. Basically, you can just go here and have a some people have test monitors. This test, where you have to go to a testing center and use it. You can take it for me.
I'm sorry, that Chris's song. I was wondering about that too. I can't get back into the test. Yeah, it doesn't have to zip off at our house, and we just had ours fixed, but it's not the same, but it's longer.
Yeah, and just about the time you think everything is going to be all right, we get these little emails from our IT people who say, the system went down X, Y.
I mean, I'm talking even mine. I'm halfway through my test, and
Well, then you
Century
should,
kicks me
the best you can do is email me, Brenda. I have to figure out what to do. If the whole university system goes down, we'll all know it together. And then I will, as the email says, give due consideration to your students under these circumstances.
And I'm going to want to update that weekend, Arlene, because I'm famous for doing that.
Oh, yeah.
And Boss will be down. Blackboard will be down.
I will check on that, but I actually checked on that before I set the exam date. And they just did, last week, they did a downtime, so I would not think so. But that is a really good point.
Yeah, that happens.
It happens frequently.
Will you send out an email so that people who either have to leave or aren't here know that the test date?
That would be an excellent idea, Monica, and I will rely on you to send me one of your emails so that I don't forget that. Okay? All right, are you good? Okay.
I have one more question. It says for next class we're supposed to bring our own classroom test.
Yeah, bring a test you use, just whatever it is, and we're going to do a little analysis of the type of items that are on it. This is not the kind of test that you're going to evaluate using the Norms technical data. For this thing, we're just going to look at the type of test item. So this is different than doing a commercial test. on the 12th. Let's get the first exam over, okay? I think so. Or is it on the 2nd? It is on the 2nd. Okay. So let's get the exam over first.
There's also a reading on there that it says will be handed out in class. It's Heather Coughlin. You don't need to read it before then.
There's a great video. YouTube is on our workshop on timesheet C. And a girl worked for a job interview. And she asked her all these questions. She said she had answers. And she said we're fifth grade teachers over there. She said she entered sheet C. So she did the interview around sheet C. And there's a lot of other things that go into it. It's really cool.
Do you have, can you give us a?
I don't know. It's just on YouTube. It's called I Choose You.
I choose you. Okay. When you need to have a break,
Yeah.
look at I choose
Look
you.
it up. Really cool.
Okay. All right, folks. Let's set a time here for my gate majors so that we can go over these creativity assessments. I know you're probably, your brain is kind of worn out, but wouldn't you rather stay with me the afternoon and come back on the morning? I thought you might. Okay. So let's take a full hour for lunch, and then I'll see you back here at 1. Anybody else?